Imagine you're washing your car. You crouch down near the rear bumper, and suddenly you see something that shouldn't be there. A small black box, magnetized to the frame, no markings, no explanation. You pull it off and immediately start asking yourself three questions. Should I remove it? Should I call the police? Or should I throw it away and pretend I never found it? Most people focus on the tracker, but that's not the real issue. The real issue is what happens in the next few minutes after you find it. Because the moment you decide what to do with that device, you may be making a decision that helps investigators or creates a completely different problem for yourself. Today, we're going to break down the exact decision point that matters. They rely on you not knowing your rights. This channel makes sure you do. Subscribe and stay informed. And if you believe more people need to see this, share it and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And it's not what most people think. The trap begins the moment you discover the tracker. Most people immediately react emotionally. Some people rip it off and throw it in a dumpster. Others smash it with a hammer. Some take it apart trying to see what's inside. Others post pictures online asking strangers what they should do. And a surprising number of people drive straight to a police station carrying the device in their hand. But here's the problem. At that moment, you usually don't know what you're looking at. You don't know who placed it. You don't know why it's there. You don't know whether it's a private tracking device, a stolen asset tracker, a fleet management device, an insurance tracker, a repossession tracker, or something connected to an active investigation. Yet many people start taking action before gathering any information. That's where mistakes happen. Picture the situation. You find the device. You immediately yank it off. Then you throw it in a river. A week later, someone asks what happened to it. Now you can't explain where it is. You can't document it. You can't identify it. And you've eliminated any opportunity to determine why it was there in the first place. The issue isn't whether you had a right to remove it. The issue is whether your actions destroyed information before you understood the situation. That's the trap. People assume finding the tracker is the important moment. It's not. The important moment is deciding what happens next. So why would officers or investigators care about that decision? Because from an investigative standpoint, information is everything. If a tracker exists, investigators may want to know whether it stayed in place, moved locations, stopped transmitting, or disappeared entirely. If someone removes it, investigators immediately know something changed. The tracker itself isn't always the valuable part. The information generated by the tracker is often the valuable part. That's why your response matters. Not because you're required to help an investigation. Not because you're required to keep a tracker attached to your vehicle, but because your reaction can dramatically change what happens afterward. Now let's get to the decision point. This is the moment the entire situation changes. You discover the device, and then you ask yourself, should I remove it right now? That is the decision point. Not reporting it, not arguing about legality, not posting about it online. The moment you decide whether to interfere with the device before understanding what it is. Let's look at the wrong response. Person, what is this? Pulls tracker off, throws it away, drives off, simple, emotional, fast. But now, several things may have happened. The device is gone. No documentation exists. No photographs exist. No identification exists. No record exists showing where it was found. The decision was made before information was gathered. Now compare that with the smarter response. Person finds device, leaves it where it is, takes photographs, documents location, records time and date, attempts to identify the device, seeks legal advice if necessary, reports suspicious activity if appropriate. Notice the difference. The second person has options. The first person has already made a permanent decision. That's why the decision point matters. Not because removing a device automatically creates legal problems, but because acting before understanding the situation eliminates information you can never recover. So what's the easiest phrase to remember? Here it is. Document first. Decide later. That's it. Document first. Decide later. Memorize that sentence because it prevents most mistakes people make in situations like this. Document first. Decide later. Let's talk about what happens next. Suppose you document the device. Now what? Well, this is where people often face pressure from friends, family, or internet advice. One person says rip it off. Another says throw it away. Another says smash it. Another says drive around with it. The problem is that every one of those suggestions assumes facts you don't yet know. You still don't know who placed it. You still don't know why it's there. You still don't know whether it's lawful, unlawful, private, commercial, or something else entirely. That's why the phrase remains the same. Document first, decide later. Now let's discuss a common question. Should you report it? Maybe. But the answer depends entirely on the circumstances. If you believe someone unlawfully placed a tracking device on your vehicle, reporting it may be appropriate. If you believe you're being stalked or harassed, reporting it may be appropriate. If you believe there's an immediate safety concern, reporting it may be appropriate. But notice something. You can only provide useful information if you've documented what you found. Again, documentation comes before decisions. Another common question. Should you remove it? Possibly. But first determine what it is. Photograph it. Document where it was located. Record identifying information. Understand the situation before taking action. Because once it's gone, it's gone. And finally, should you throw it away? This is where many people get themselves into trouble. Throwing it away feels satisfying. It feels decisive. It feels like you're taking control. But from an information standpoint, it's often the worst option because it destroys the opportunity to learn why the device was there in the first place. That's why experienced investigators often document everything before touching anything. The principle is simple. Information first, decision second. Now let's briefly discuss the legal foundation. The legal issues surrounding vehicle tracking can be complicated and vary based on jurisdiction and circumstances. In the United States, courts have addressed certain government tracking activities, particularly when law enforcement physically places tracking devices for investigative purposes. But that's not the focus of today's video. The practical lesson is much simpler. Before you make legal decisions, gather facts. Before you remove evidence, document it. Before you react emotionally, understand what you're dealing with. That's the principle that protects people from making avoidable mistakes. So let's recap. The trap is focusing on the tracker instead of your response to the tracker. The decision point occurs the moment you decide whether to interfere with the device before understanding what it is. The exact phrase is document first, decide later. And that's the phrase to remember if you ever discover a tracking device on your vehicle. Because the smartest move usually isn't the fastest move. It's the most informed move. The smartest drivers aren't the ones who talk the most. They're the ones who recognize the decision point before the officer does.